So just not to sound like, as Father, as Deacon said, as it goes, you know, we want to try to sound like we know what we're doing.
Oh, and that's not going to be good because I was going to say, tú eres,
Oh, no.
tú eres bueno en hable oración. Don't even know if I said it right, but I was hoping I'm saying you were great at praying in Spanish. So yeah, that when it just started flowing that we were praying everything in Spanish, I was so proud of all of you because I know you were stumbling and the same as I was, but you did it. That was the good part. You did it. We are finished with our catechetical lessons, so now I'm going to give you two little critiques. And it's not just about the lessons, but at the very beginning, I said that you needed to dress for a presentation, as if you were out doing a presentation, not with the group of us. Some of you did that, some of you did not.
And wear a tie.
You got points for wearing a tie. But you need to start thinking, because Bishop Bradley is very strong on how we present ourselves. That's why on Saturdays you don't see me wearing jeans. I sneak in here sometimes on Tuesday nights in jeans because I've had the day off. But when we are out, we are to dress appropriately. So gentlemen, for you, that's going to mean a tie and suit coat. Okay? Until you are ordained, and then you're going to look like this gentleman when you go out. But he does have that expectation that you are a symbol of the church, that you are going to dress appropriately. So you didn't get marked down for any of that. It's just something to keep in mind. I wanted to see, once I said that, how you would interpret that and what would happen. And this one I want to be very, very clear. No one has done anything wrong, okay? Can you repeat that back to me?
No one has done anything wrong.
All right.
Here comes the butt though.
There have been a couple there have been some personal sharings, okay? And I've heard you say, well, I didn't tell my wife I was going to say this.
I didn't say that.
In the future, down the way, keep that in mind, that when you're going to share something personal, you do need to clue your wife in on it. You need to maybe get her permission to be able to do it. When I go places and I share about my marriage with John, if I get to a very critical point, I always ask his permission to share our story. If he tells me no, I only give a very brief statement. I never go into any detail. The same he's learned vice versa. There came a time when, because I'm a very personal person, private person, and so there came a time when something happened to me, and the next thing I know, one of our parishioners stopped me in the parking lot at Myers and started talking to me about it. John heard about that at night, because to me that wasn't something to be shared. And so we have to work on those kinds of things. So I'm just putting it out there. Now, do you have to ask your kids every time you do a homily about your kids? Maybe not. Our kids always said to John before he was ordained, okay, you can do all the homilies you want, just don't talk about me. But when you're talking about your spouse, or you're going to tell something very private about a story that may work really well in your homily, please have that communication ahead of time. So don't surprise them. Not on something like that. I've already had someone volunteer to do Malcolm's evening prayers. So we've got all of that covered, and Deacon John and I will take care of the snack times for all of that. So we've got that piece already covered. Any questions, concerns? They're all quiet. They really want to get to canon law. Look at that. Even Hal's doing it.
I don't know, I was thinking even when I clued you guys in on some things, you still didn't catch it.
Who was in on what?
You and my wife on Saturday.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm gonna be different. Well, I just played along, didn't I just play along?
No, I'm sorry I missed Saturday.
You didn't watch it on tape?
No, that's okay.
No, that's right. No, I didn't take that much.
All right, starting over here from last week. This is intro to canon law. This is not, you know, canon law. This is an introduction. That being said, you'll be happy to know that as of this evening, we will have finished 750 of the 1,752 canons that are in here. So with the 5 weeks remaining, that means the reading assignments, instead of being over 500 canons, will be down to about 200, which you should easily be able to accomplish. Just so you know, even though I went to school for years, I read every one of these canons every week that you're reading, and the reading assignment. And then I look up some explanations in the Big Green Book. Those of you who are holding the Big Green Book, I think you're crazy. I never found a way to be able to hold that book sitting in a chair or laying on a bed or anything else. So I use the smaller version to be able to, you know, kind of relax on the couch. There was a couple times this weekend where I relaxed a little bit too far. And I had to wake up and remember where I was at. Okay, this is the section, and there's a lot of stuff to cover tonight on the people of God, okay? In case you didn't notice it, at the beginning of each section of canons, there are some canons that may sound familiar to you if you've studied any of the Vatican II documents. And in case you're wondering, in the Brown Book, not in the Green Book, in the Brown Book, at the bottom, it will say that Canon 204 comes from Lumen Gentium 9 to 17, 31, 34 to 36, and some other encyclical for which I don't remember the initials. I'd have to look up. AA, whatever that one is. I don't remember which one that is without looking at it. So these early canons in each section are much more or less legal than they are documents that came out of the Vatican Council, Vatican II. That being said, when did Vatican II end, roughly? 67, 68, in there, around there. And when was this canon law written? 83. So it took them from the beginning of the council 20 years to produce the Code of Canon Law and get it by all the powers that be. One of the things that they looked at was when they were doing the drafts of this, where were they going to put things? And they tended to follow the documents of Vatican II and said, we're not going to talk about the Pope and the Bishop first, we're going to talk about the people of God. And if you look at Canon 204, paragraph 1, you're going to see the terminology. The first word in Latin is Christi Fidelis. That's the Christian faithful. The Christian faithful, as we'll find out, are made up of the laity, the clericals, and part of the laity is those in consecrated life. But we are incorporated through baptism, made sharers with Christ in the priestly, prophetic, and royal functions. What would you think that those would be translated to if we were referring to the bishop? He has 3 minaret, as Christ did. Christ was both priest, prophet, and king. The bishop is what? Teacher, sanctifier, and governor, or governance. So those are the three munerae of the bishop. And of course the Pope too, because he's a little higher up there. But he's still a bishop. Paragraph 2 talks about the church. I think I got it right. Church, yes. The church subsists in the Catholic Church in communion with the Pope. So the church constituted and organized in this world as a society, subsists means contained in the Catholic Church, governed by successors of Peter and the bishops in communion with him. Okay? That's kind of important. How many Christians are there in the world?
11 billion?
Yeah, something like that, a bunch, right? We ain't going to get into the actual number. But how many of them are actually Catholic?
1 billion?
Yeah, something like 1 billion are Catholic. So we could say that they subsist in the Church of Christ, the Catholic Church, but they also have to be in communion with the Pope and the bishops. So what they're saying is kind of a definition there, again, from Vatican. 205 talks about full communion, which we are sharing in profession of faith, sacraments, and ecclesiastical church government. Okay? So, where would a Greek Orthodox fall in that progression? Do they have profession of faith?
Yes.
Do they have sacraments?
Yes.
Do they have ecclesiastical governance?
Yes.
No.
No?
Not the same as us.
They do not have ecclesiastical governance because who do they not recognize? The Roman Pontiff, the Pope. So that was a trick question. If I'd have said the Greek Catholic Church, that would be a different question. Don't worry about it, it won't be on the quiz. But you need to know that. Okay. 206 includes and incorporates catechumens. And how does it do that? That's a question. I'm not going to answer this one until you come up with your answer.
Those who choose under the influence of the Holy Spirit.
To be incorporated into the church are joined in a special way, and it invites them to lead a life, right? And where might you find a corresponding canon? Did you read it yet? But let's look quickly at canon 788. Can you flip back to that? Without losing your place, I don't want to overstress you. It's been a long week.
We got at least 4.
I haven't found it yet either.
Page 258.
What does it say?
788 now.
When the period of the pre-catechumen has been completed, those who have made known their intention to embrace faith in Christ are to be admitted to the catechumen in liturgical ceremonies, and their names are to be inscribed in the book of designated for this purpose.
Okay? And then it talks about some other rules and regulations that go with it. Now let's look at 1170.
$365.
What does it talk about? It talks about blessings, right? 1170, it says, blessings are to be imparted, first of all, to all Catholics, can also be given to catechumens and even non-Catholics, unless there's a prohibition of the church to the contrary. And lastly, let's look at 1183. The very beginning. when it comes to funerals, catechumens must be counted among the Christian faithful. Meaning, we don't say, well, they didn't get baptized, so therefore we can't bury them from the church. We can't. It says so right here. There are other examples of people who can be buried from the church, but that's the primary one. Yes?
Is the dismissal that takes place for the catechumens during Mass, so they're not a part of the creed and whatnot, is that canonical, or is that just kind of a liturgical law that's happened over time?
I think that's RCIA regulations.
Okay.
And that, they were put out by the USCCB at some point
Okay.
for this country.
Right, right.
You know, they vary from country to country. I'm sure that you don't find somebody sitting in a 20-week class in the bush country of Africa. Probably doesn't happen that way. Okay, but it does. You gotta remember, Latin Church, it's a whole world.
Right.
I don't know how they do it down in Australia. I never asked my classmates from there. I should have. Things happen. All right, moving right along. So you'll probably want to remember that catechumens have a right to Christian burial. It's not something where you say, well, my husband was never Catholic, but I was my whole life, and he always supported the church, therefore he should be buried from the church. My phone? I'm not answering it. I'm not answering it.
In the office.
It'll go away. Eventually.
The answer to the question you just asked is no. Is that correct?
What's that?
That even though I'm a Catholic and I was participating in the Catholic faith, my husband was not baptized, even though he supported.
They can appeal to the church. The widow comes in and says, boy, you know, oh, Tim, he was a great guy. Let's see if we can go ahead and bury him from the church, and permission can be given to do so. Okay? But that's a little different than what you get with a catechumen. A catechumen has a right. They're granted a privilege.
Yeah, but the person that hasn't been baptized, because I know somebody like that, my question is, can they be buried with a Christian burial? You
I
say you
assume
have to
so.
appeal to the church, is that correct?
Well, they'd appeal to the church, maybe just to the minister that's doing it, or maybe to the bishop. If it's someone of importance, say it's the mayor of Kalamazoo, they might appeal to the bishop in that case to have it done. But have you ever done, you two deacons in the back, ever done a non-Catholic funeral?
I think I did one, but not in the church.
I'd say it was the church. I said, have you ever done a funeral? I've done a number of them. Because what does the law say? The law says if their minister is not readily available, they can ask for that particular, it's not a sacrament, so they can ask for that. And readily available is defined as, could mean they haven't been to church in 20 years and they don't know who he is.
Doesn't the catechism say that every baptized Christian has a right to Christian burial?
Probably. I'd have to look at the book, and I didn't bring that one. But yes, I've done a number of them where people come in and say, well, George was a great guy. I know you. He knew you. Can you do the funeral? Yes. Absolutely. I just did one last fall with my boss, my old boss, he retired. He was from Scandinavia. What was that? Lutheran or something? I don't know. One of those. The church and the law in that case is very liberal, if you want, on deciding what the grounds are for that. Some things are very strict. So it's the interpretation of the law. And you'll find it in there where they'll say, for grave or very grave cause. Sometimes they'll say, you know, something much more loose and it allows you a little more flexibility. If we run across one, I'll mention it. All right, so we've gotten Christian burial. 207 talks about the, 207, here we go, talks about by divine institution they're among the Christian faithful in the church, sacred ministers, who in law are also called clerics, and other members of the Christian faithful called laypersons. Where does, trick question now, where does a person in consecrated life, which group did they fall into?
It could be either.
Right, because it could be a deacon or a priest, or even a bishop, who belongs to an order. Hence, Pope Francis, right? He's a Jesuit, isn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Even though he took Francis for a name, and not Ignatius. I'm not going there. All right? It was a good move. Get two of them lined up easy. So it could be either, but most religious we think of as being sisters and brothers, monks, nuns, consecrated virgins, etc. Most of those are not going to be considered clerics. They're considered laypersons. So be careful of trick questions on the quiz.
But if you go for those different orders within that, you know, like the third order of Franciscans, I mean,
Right.
they're not even considered
Consecrated life.
consecrated.
No.
Right? Those are just lay people.
Right,
Who are associated.
who are associated with that order. And in the old days, don't ask me to get too deep in this, but first order were men, second order were women, and third order were the laity. Okay, it's not really that way anymore, but if you go way back, Middle Ages stuff. Okay, 208 to 203, or excuse me, 223, talks about obligations and rights of all the Christian faithful. I'm not going to read through the canons. I want to take a quick look at our buddy Corydon here, who is on page 60, I believe. It starts. And it lists them. It lists, first of all, the rights, and then on the next page, 62, it lists obligations. Do I have to read them out loud? You all read them. If you need them, where are they? Well, they're in the canons, but sometimes they're hard to dig out. You need to know at some point in the future. Look in the intro book. Again, look in this book first, then in this book, and then in this book. Unless you want to spend hours reading. Because these things, each canon might get 2 or 3 pages to explain it. Whereas here, you just get the canon, and here you get what Corydon considered to be important. Anybody notice anything about Corydon? Not only did he write that book, but he's one of the 3 authors of this book. And they're only that order because they were alphabetical. And I know 2 of them. I never met Corydon, but I know Beale and Green very well. Green was a little strange, as I remember, but he was good. He was very good. They're all very good. All right, so we got those. That was good. 224 to 231 covers the rights and duties of the lay people. That's page 62. I lost it. I should never close the book. 62 to 64, etc. Well, actually, to the end of 64. So, beginning of 64. So those are actually 62 and 63. And you can read those. If you got questions, I'll answer them. Or try to. Is it break time yet? Not yet. All right. Moving along. Now, 232 to 293 starts to cover sacred ministers and clerics. Man, that's a lot of cans. All right. He talks about formation of clerics. That the church has the right to form them, hence that's why you're here. Okay? And it talks about the duties in 233 of 233 well, and it talks about all this responsibility of everyone in the church to foster vocations. And you're going to notice the rest of those canons in there, except 236, are going to be pretty much concerning priestly formation. Okay? If we look at 236, it says, according to the precepts of the Conference of Bishops, those aspiring to permanent diaconate are to be formed to nourish a spiritual life and instruction to fulfill correctly the duties proper to that order. Where would you find those? In the United States.
That national register.
Yeah, that's it. The big long book. And does it just cover formation? No, it goes on forever. I think, is it 3 years afterwards, I think we use? Yeah, we use 3 years afterwards. There's post-ordination formation. So don't think you're done when you get ordained. And then not only that, you got to do so much training for the rest of your life. I think until you get really ancient. I don't know, I'm in the middle ancient, not the really ancient. I'd have to ask Deacon Bodway about the really ancient. Well, maybe Jerry Smoker. He's pretty ancient. I don't know. There's that really old deacon too, Al Patrick. He's been ordained over 45 years, I think now.
Some of them still go on and just do education, so.
Yeah, right, yep. You're always invited and will attend. Oh, I mean, can attend, that's it. Now, one thing I want to note here on 232, 264, if there were a lacuna in the formation of deacons from the USCCB, the one that we use, where might you find the answer? I talked about lacunas last week. Lacuna is a vacancy in the law. So a vacancy in the what the USCCB issues, where would you find it? Parallel canons, right? So if we're looking for something that's not covered under the diaconate, where might you find it? In the priestly formation, right? So don't forget about parallel places. You shouldn't have to do that until one of you relieves John of his duties, which could be any time now. Well, soon.
Is that lacuna? L-A-C-U-N-A?
Yeah, lacuna. L-A-C-U-N-A. Okay. You want to read about all the rectors and things that they do and all that? Be my guest. Take your time. Okay, we are on page 83 in this book, Canon 265. Talks about the enrollment or incarnation of clerics. Okay? When you are ordained in this diocese, you will be incarnated in this diocese. Okay?
What number is that?
265. I don't know in this book. I don't have the big fat book open.
330.
Page 330 for the big fat book. Okay. So the church abhors a vacuum. And in this case, it abhors an unattached or transient clerics. Okay? You cannot be unattached. You must be incarnated somewhere. Now, you could be incarnated in a particular church, which is a diocese, another word for diocese, we'll come to that later, or in a personal prelature, or in an institute of consecrated life, or society endowed with this faculty. So if you're a Benedictine priest, you could be serving in the Diocese of Kalamazoo, but you would be incarnated where? In the house to which you are assigned by your order. Now you may not get there but once a year, but you're still incarnated in that house. Now for diocesan personnel, if you want, or clerics, we're all incarnated in the diocese. Deacon John's had it with the winter. He decides he's going to go to Florida for the next 6 weeks. He goes to the bishop and asks permission because he can't be out of his diocese for more than how much?
A month.
A month, 4 weeks, a month, yeah. So he goes and asks, is he incarnated when he gets to Florida in the Diocese of St. Petersburg?
No.
No, he's still incarnated here. Does he have any faculties?
Not until you get to sign letter signed by both bishops.
Maybe not officially.
You've got to have a letter of recommendation or agreement between the two bishops, right, before you can do stuff. No, then you can't. That's what the book says.
You read the book, that says incarnation, not faculties. I want you to get that concept separate. Okay? He could be granted faculties. Now, he probably wouldn't get it for 6 weeks, but let's say he's really old, like I talked about those ones earlier, and he's going to spend 6 months at each location. And Florida, believe it or not, is inundated with priests, so let's say he's going to New Mexico, which probably isn't. Okay? And he could get faculties for the 6 months he's down there from the Bishop of Santa Fe, as an example. And he still has his faculties here. Okay?
It's still incarnate.
But he's still incarnated here. That's very, very important. Okay? Now, if we get a priest, I'll take a particular priest that I know is applying for this right now. He's from South America. And his bishop knows he's up here. He's still incarnated in his diocese in wherever it is, Argentina, I don't even know which country it is. And he wants to be incarnated up here. He wants to stay. Okay? Meaning he's going to have to do a couple of things. What's the other thing he might have to do under the civil law?
Green card.
He's got to get a visa that's either long-term or he's got to somehow get a green card that's going to keep him here. Okay? He can't be on a 2-year work visa that's going to expire. But let's just say he's all set with the State Department. Now he's going to ask his bishop if it's okay if he becomes incarnated up here. That bishop is going to issue what?
Ex-cardinals.
A letter of excarnation of some sort, or a decree. But it doesn't take effect until what? Until this bishop agrees to incarnate him. And when he's excarnated from one place, he's immediately incarnated to another. What else would that? Yeah, go ahead.
Just, I understand the incarnation because you only can belong to one diocese.
Mm-hmm.
But you're talking about faculties. So do you still have to get that letter from each bishop on the faculties, or you just get the letter from the bishop from?
You have to have a letter in good standing, which means that you're not under accusation or have any problems with abuse of children, any of that kind of stuff.
That's from the bishop where you're incarnated. You get a letter of good standing.
The place, yes, the place that you leave from.
Show that.
That isn't just to go down there and get faculties. It may be to just do anything down there. You go down there, you got permission from the pastor of the local church to marry your niece and soon-to-be nephew in Indianapolis. You have to have a letter in good standing, and usually a letter of delegation from him to go in and do that, or even to baptize someone. Not to go on vacation out. They don't care about that. Right. Yes?
What do bishops do then? Because Bishop Dominic stays with us a lot at St. Joseph. He's from Lodvar, and he has done confirmation, he celebrates Mass. So does the bishop write a letter for himself? Or like, how does...
Where's he from? What diocese?
In Lodvar, in Kenya.
In Lodvar, yes.
Yeah.
So he's up. He's up here for whatever reason.
Right. He's up here for like...
He has to have that letter.
Okay. But who writes it in the case that it's already...
I would assume his chancellor.
Okay.
Or his vicar general. We're going to talk about vicars and stuff later.
Okay.
But it's somebody, I suppose he could sign it himself. But you know, it's gonna, you know, yeah, you gotta have the letter. Well, the rest of it, you know, there's clauses in here that talks about bishops, and a bishop can't go do anything in another bishop's seat without letting that bishop know and getting at least tacit permission to do so. I was in the Washington, D.C. area for a period of time, and I happen to know the Bishop of Arlington. He would go to restaurants in D.C., but I asked him to come to my graduation or something, and he said, no, I don't want to do that because it will cause all kinds of hate and discontent, because he has to get permission from, it was Worrell at the time, I think. I can't remember for sure if it was. He has to get permission to the Archbishop of Washington to come across the line in any kind of official capacity. Not that he can't travel there, but he can't be there representing, you know, doing anything. Now, does that happen frequently, that they have some kind of tacit approval? You bet your butt. Because if you're out in the West, let's just say the upper middle West, it might be easier for, you take places like North and South Dakota and Montana, it might be easier for the bishop who's confirming somebody on one side of the border between North Dakota and Montana to go across the border and confirm those kids too, rather than somebody getting in an airplane and flying, you know, across the country, or getting in a car and driving for days, especially in the winter when the mountain passes are all closed. So they do that all the time there. You don't see that much around here. I mean, yes.
Just to let you know that happens, I had a speaker, an auxiliary bishop from Grand Rapids, I invited to come down and speak in the diocese. And he said, I'd quicker come if your bishop invited me. So I learned the hard way on that.
Yeah, they don't want to take the chance of offending anyone. Okay, it's almost medieval in the sense that it's their diocese and another bishop isn't going to come in. Even, and we talk about metropolitans, even the metropolitan who can come in and say a mass anywhere, he's still going to tell the bishop that he's coming. Okay? It's just a sign of respect, right? We'll talk about that when we get into that section. So you understand incarnation fairly well?
What about clergy in the military?
What about?
Are they incarnated in the diocese, or is there like, because like with records, there's a central office we have to go through in the military.
They're incarnated to the Archdiocese of the military in Washington, in Washington, D.C. And they have power everywhere that they are, but it's usually restricted to military bases and those kind of things. Ships at sea, those situations. They can do civil things if they have to. I mean, could be a marriage of somebody that works on the base, you know.
The only time that would be different, Deacon, is if you have a cleric who's actually in this diocese, like in the National Guard, he still belongs to this diocese then.
Right, right.
That would be the only.
I was going to ask you about that because Father Stanley went into
Right.
the military as a chaplain.
Yes. He got permission from this bishop. He was under, he probably, I don't know how exactly how he did, but I would assume he had a letter to say, okay, I'm in the National Guard or the Air Guard or whatever. I'm going to be on active duty in Iraq, Afghanistan. He would be, the letter would probably, from our bishop, would probably say that he is to follow the archbishops, bishop of the military, and the number of auxiliary bishops that are there, and his vicars, when he's operating in that sequence. Okay. I never asked the canon lawyer, who was a priest, who flew in the Air Guard all the time from St. Minors. So he doesn't have a geographic bishop. He has a personal bishop, a personal prelature, if you want, or consecrated life. He's in it's the St. Minors. He's in an order priest. Okay? He's under the order. So when he went on National Guard duty and he's flying to England, I don't know. I didn't ask him. I just assumed he would get the permissions he needed. He had to have permission of his abbot to go on that. But I don't know what happens when he gets called up. Because he's not on duty all the time. So he was their director of IT, plus he was teaching a bunch of classes in the seminary. So if he got orders for 2 weeks of active duty, not his normal 2 weeks, but a special, and he did that a lot. I don't know. That was between them. I mean, between his bishop, his abbot and the bishop of the military. I would assume when he got active duty orders, he would go in and say to his abbot, look, I got orders to do this. Do I have your permission to go? And then he would have to contact someone if he couldn't go. And he was a captain at that point. Okay, incarnation we've covered pretty well. If you look at 284, we'll skip from there, from 266, we're going to go to 284. 284? 284. On the right page. Be too far away. So you're incarnated at the reception of the diaconate, according to 266, and you become a clerk. What about 284? What does it say?
Suitable garb.
Suitable what kind of garb?
Ecclesiastic.
Church clothes.
Right. According to what?
Whatever your bishop tells you.
No.
To the norms of the conference of bishops.
To the norms of the conference of the bishops. So that comes out of the USCCB and according to legitimate local customs. And where are you going to find that? Not in your faculties.
Talking to other people.
You can do that, but that could get you in trouble. There's a diaconal policy handbook that you will be handed at some point. And it tells you when and where to do what. It's not all inclusive. We try. There'll be times when you'll be asked to show up in suitable garb, not clerics. Business suit and tie. Or at least a sports coat. If you're from the south part of the diocese. South and western. There was a little dig there, in case you didn't notice. Yeah, most of the time, I always looked at it and it pretty much defines this. If you're doing something that is official, you should be in blacks, clerical garb. Now, some dioceses, be careful where you travel. Some dioceses have said their priests wear blacks, and so do their deacons, except for the shirt, and then they wear gray shirts in some dioceses. There are some dioceses where the bishop has said, I don't want my deacons and clerics ever. His prerogative, they wear business suits. Go to church on Sunday in a business suit of some sort. Okay? Might be a black one, it won't have a collar. Okay? Here, I always go to the fact that what am I doing? Am I at a liturgical service? Am I doing Stations of the Cross? Am I doing a communion service? Am I visiting the sick? Am I in some official type church capacity? Then I wear the blacks. Okay? If I'm going to the Lenten soup supper at the church this Thursday, I will not have my blacks on. First of all, I don't like things spilled on the front of my black. You can't bleach the thing, it's black. You ain't going to get all that grease out of there anyway. So you don't wear it. All right? Makes sense? That's kind of the way it works. And there'll be times when you vest and times when you don't vest. You'll get
Wear a
those.
suit Thursday night?
No.
You can wear suit.
Well, sure. It's an informal thing.
Because he's not representing the diocese.
Yeah, I'm not representing the diocese. I'm just there as a parishioner. Now, do I have an official, quasi-official function? You bet your butt. I'm there as the deacon of that parish, but not performing anything official. Okay? I think it's important, not just me, maybe other deacons don't see it this way. If something's going on in my parish where there's gonna be a lot of people there, my absence will be noted. Right, Jeff? Deacon Dave, I say Jeff, sorry, Deacon Dave. I'm looking back there, it's a little long look. All right, so if you go to something that's unofficial, do you feel obligated to show up to some of those things? Not everything, but some of those things, okay? That covers guard. You'll get more from somebody else later on. All right. 267.
260,
Are we going back?
I'm on 267.
I thought you went to
284.
I did, I jumped back. That was just an aside. You get asides, I don't cover it later again. You get one shot at these things. And that talks about the letters that you were concerned about. But look at paragraph 2 very carefully. Excardination that's granted does not take effect unless the incarnation in another particular church has been obtained. So even though your bishop says you can go to Alabama, if you don't get incarnated, that excardination letter is not worth the paper it's printed on. It doesn't take effect. Usually the letter would say that.
Usually they're timed, it'll be 12 o'clock, 12:01.
Right, exactly, yeah. It'll say, as of 12 a.m., you're excardinated from Diocese A, in the 12:01 the next day, you're incarnated in this diocese. Okay, 268 talks about how you can gain incarnation by the law, which says that if you've been in a particular church for a period of time, but still incarnated in another one, after 5 years, and notification by letter of the bishop that you've been there 5 years and, in the next 20 days or whatever it says here, I don't think it gives you a time frame, that you expect to be incarnated at the end of that 5-year period, and he doesn't get back to you within the allotted 5-year time frame, you become, by law, incarnated into that diocese. Again, you got to give him a warning. You can't just say, well, I've been here 5 years, I'm incarnated now. You have to give him a letter saying, my 5 years is approaching in a month.
And that's nothing to do with faculty.
No, you probably already have faculties who've been here 5 years. I can't imagine any bishop saying, well, you just go sit in the corner until your 5 years is up, and then I'm going to give you faculties, especially a priest. We have that many priests floating around? I don't think so. And even deacons. Some of us are getting old. I'm waiting for my relief. You guys best get ordained soon. All right, 269 to 271 talks about some rules that are involved with incarnation. Okay, one of the things is you should look probably at 269 number 1.
God bless you.
The necessity or advantage of its own particular church demands it, and without prejudice the prescripts of the law concerning the decent support of clerics. So, you can't allow an incarnation unless, this is the bishop now, unless he's taking into consideration the decent support of the cleric. Which means you bought it if you incarnate him. Once you incarnate him, unless you figure out a way to get him out of your diocese, when he gets to retirement age, guess who's supporting him? The bishop is. Now, there's no, usually they do that by, as soon as you come, they incorporate you into the priestly retirement plan, and they put aside for that. But it doesn't stop there. Morally, the bishop is, and the diocese is held to the support of that person until he dies.
Are you talking about housing and so forth? Is that what?
Could be, could be. Now, priests are expected to provide for their own retirement, but there are some more, you know, you just can't say, well, we're sorry you came from South America and you didn't have a retirement plan, and you're gonna retire in the next 10 years. Good luck. We'll see you later, pat them on the back. No, it doesn't work that way. And we'll read about that in other sections here. Let's see the other rules here. Okay, then 270 talks about excarnation can be licitly granted only for just causes, such as the advantage of the church or the good of the cleric himself. It cannot be denied, however, except for evident, grave causes. That's one of those serious things. I thought there's clauses that says very serious. They can't say, well, I don't like the way your haircut is, therefore we're not going to incarnate you. It's got to be for a very grave cause.
What would be an example of that?
You're a felon in Alabama. And therefore, we're not going to take you up here. Or whatever. Could be something else. A cleric who thinks he has been wrong and has found an accepting bishop, however, is permitted to make recourse against the decision.
So is that saying that if a priest wants to move dioceses, he's going to get moved? Sure.
But he has to get permission to move.
He should get permission, but really, they should approve it.
They should approve it if there's no cause against it. It's usually taking one more than getting rid of one. Usually if a guy asks to be excarnated, he has a reason. He wasn't getting along with his fellow presbyters. He irritated a lot of people in his parishes. You know, the bishop says, oh boy, he wants to go, let him go. Okay? Because you can't just dump him, you know. You got to kind of give him that cause. And usually he'll know, you know, when the bishop gives him the assignment to go to Byron Center, the other end of the world, or New Buffalo, you know, maybe he's trying to tell you something. Or even down to, you know, maybe Albion. You're sent to Albion. I don't want to see you crossing I-69 the rest of your life. You know, that's a good hint, you know. But then the reason, you know, then he's got to go find himself a bishop. And he says, well, you know, I was originally from Alabama. I'll go down and ask the Bishop of Mobile, Alabama. I can come down, I like the weather better anyway. And he talks the bishop down there into it. And he has no felonies, no abuse, sexual abuse problems. He just wants to get away from it and go back where the weather's warmer. They would have to find reason to refuse it. Now, the recommendation letter from the current bishop is, how soon can you get him out of here? He might be a little bit on the alert. Okay?
Are these letters of permission difficult to attain? Do you have to have a lot of presentations for them, or?
I would say that would usually take place through the director of, in your case, the diaconate, once you're ordained, or the director of priestly vocations. There is a priest that does that. They're going to assist you in writing the letter. And I would assume that there would be an interview at some point with the bishop. Wouldn't you think, John? In those cases, yeah, you're going to have to, you're not just going to send this guy a letter and say, I've had it with Michigan, it's been cold here, I'm going to Florida. You know, let me tell you, Florida's a tough place to get into and get incarnated. They have an overabundance of everybody because all the old folks go down there, including the old priests and deacons. So if they tell you that you're in a new parish, you have to take an airboat. You know there's a big problem. Okay, there's a few other rules, but you can read them at your leisure because you got so much leisure time. Note in 272 though that a diocesan administrator cannot grant excarnation. A diocesan administrator comes into play when the diocese, the see is vacant, sede vacante in Latin. The bishop died, okay? Or the bishop got transferred. because he's had it with Kalamazoo. He'd rather be the Archbishop of Chicago or St. Louis than to be here. So the diocesan administrator would be either appointed or elected, depending on how it goes. And we'll talk about that in a later section. And he's not to grant excarnation or incarnation or even permission to move to another particular church until the see has been vacant for 1 year. And he has the consent of the College of Consultors from the diocese leader. Okay? Okay, one of the obligations of Word 273 is that all clerics must have a reverence and obedience to the Supreme Pontiff and to their ordinary. You'll find out about the obedience at ordination, if not before. You make a promise of obedience to the bishop and his successors. And your wife. That's always been since the day you got married, right?
I do.
Right, Don? Don's not even going to say it. He's in trouble, he knows. Says anything wrong, he's in big trouble. Only clerics, 274 is very important. Only clerics that are in offices that require the power of orders or governments. So that says that even though the church encourages laypersons to take certain positions within the church, there are certain ones, the pastor of a parish, as an example, must be in orders. In this case, if you read the law, it doesn't say, even though sometimes we translate that as cleric, it says sacerdos in Latin, which is priestly, not diaconal. Okay? And if it has anything to do with governance, yes. Now, the chancellor would be a good example. And you have a chancellor that's not a cleric. Do we have a chancellor that's not a cleric? Sir Michael Emmons is not a cleric.
Now, we would be looking for that sacra, meaning priest.
Anytime you see the word cleric, you better look over in the Latin side.
Okay, if we look over on this particular one though, am I missing it or it's not? I don't see it there.
I don't think it says it there.
So then we
Because
have to look
a cleric
further.
could be in an office that requires the exercise of the power of orders and the power of ecclesiastical governance. But if you look at pastor, when we get to the pastor section, look at it there.
Okay.
Okay?
So this is like general.
Yeah, this is very general. But governance requires a cleric in the church. And in Seattle, unless it's changed recently, the chancellor of the diocese of, well, at least when I was going to school a few years ago, of the diocese in Seattle is a lay canon lawyer who's a woman. She had a canon law degree. She was the chancellor before she got the canon law degree. Because it doesn't require it. That's one of the offices that does not. And then it talks about the rest of the duties of pastoral ministry. Number 1, number 2, to pray and to go to the Eucharist, and number 3 is the liturgy of the hours. What does it say about permanent deacons there? You're a cleric, right? Do you have to do all the hours?
Deacon,
Morning and night.
There's a section in the diaconal part that
Defined
says
by
morning and evening prayer. Does it say you can't do the other hours? It says you gotta go on retreat and you gotta use the sacrament of penance on a regular basis or something like that.
How often do you have to go on retreat?
Once a year, normally. That's everybody I know. Bishops, priests, deacons, we all go once a year. And we drag our wives along, poor things. Yes, sir.
How much of the prayers do the priests have to do?
They do, currently they do morning and evening prayer, the office of readings, and some form of daytime prayer. I don't think they do 3 different ones.
I think there's 1 or 2 that they are exempted
Yeah. The old days of doing them every 3 hours all night. You might still find that in some monasteries and institutes of consecrated life. But most of us do 3 or 4. I do 3. Okay. I do the office of readings and morning prayer, and then I do evening prayer. And once in a while, when I'm awake at bedtime, I'll do night prayer. But I almost never do midday prayer because until recently I was working during midday, and it was difficult to stop what you're doing. And you only get a half hour for lunch. You're at the feed trough for 29 of those minutes to get that in. 277 talks about celibacy for clerics. What about permanent deacons?
After the death of your wife.
After the death of your wife. And back in the deacon section, we talk about that in greater detail. It says that deacons do not have to be celibate except after the death of their wife. Some wives would like it the other way. After the death of the deacon is celibate forever. 281 is important only then when it talks about remuneration. That's payment. And it talks about the fact, basically, that since clerics dedicate themselves to the ecclesiastical ministry, they deserve remuneration, which is consistent with their condition, etc. So, there's another section in the book here that talks about permanent deacons are expected to and usually have a civil job and then have a civil retirement of some sort. So you're not to expect remuneration, but paragraph 3 does say that there are times when you will be. So if you're assigned as a 517-2, what's that?
Administrator?
Yeah. Well, 517-2 says you are acting as one who takes care of a parish, but not have care of souls, which is only a priest. And unfortunately, canon law did not give that a name. So we have all kinds of names floating around the country. So I always refer to them as 517-2s, and you can look it up if you want to know what it is. That one is the safe name. If you don't have a canon law, you're stuck. So, Deacon John, who works full-time, poor guy, over in Goble, Sacred Heart, gets some kind of remuneration. St. Jude. Did I say Sacred Heart? Close. Jude is impossible. You always ask me. All right. It says in 282 we're to live a simple lifestyle. Does that mean you got to sell all your goods? Take a vow of poverty? Maybe. What? If you are a deacon who is in consecrated life. Because then you'd have to take poverty, chastity, and obedience. Can't do that with a wife. My wife would really be upset if I had to take the vow of poverty. Okay? So there could be celibacy for a permanent deacon. Permanent deacon would be one who is in an institute of consecrated life of some sort and was ordained to the diaconate, but has no calling to the priesthood. There aren't very many of them, but there are some.
Did you have to sell your house?
I don't know. It depends on the laws of the particular order. Usually, you divest yourself of everything. You may not have to sell your house. You may just have to put it in trust with someone. And it just depends. because they all have different rules. Franciscans and Benedictines and Dominicans, and there are all a whole bunch of them out there. They all have different regulations and rules about what poverty means. Okay? Some of them you can't own the clothes you wear. Okay? They issue them to you, and you're to take care of them, but if they come and ask for them back, you have to give them back. They're not yours. They belong to the order. Other ones you can have minor pieces of stuff. You know, your own prayer book or whatever. But, and it also concerns gifts. Sometimes when the sisters would get a gift, they would say, they'd go to Mother Superior and say, I got this medal or this statue, can I keep it in my room? Yes. Otherwise they would say, no, that gift is intended for the order, it has to be turned over to the order. It might be monetary too.
Can you talk about the word of extravagance as it's explained in here as a deacon? I know you talked about driving this older, small car instead of a Lincoln or whatever you wanted to drive in our last class.
I did, huh?
You did.
Well, I must have slipped up. Did you guys get that on? Is that on tape? Take that off. Erase that one.
That's the only thing I remember from that class.
That's good. You got something. That might be one of the questions on the next quiz.
What car did he drive?
What car did I drive? Yeah, I had a Subaru, by the way, just in case you were wondering. So,
All-wheel drive.
all-wheel drive. And that gets me around to all those communion calls I have to do out in the backwoods of Berry County and some of the other counties, Allegan County, on the Fridays that I go out and do that, which is every Friday. So, it would say that you know, I think it would have to depend on where you're at. What we might decide is a simple life in the United States may look extravagant in India or South America. So, I have a house on a lake. Is that extravagant? I don't think so. There are houses in Kalamazoo that are probably 5 times the cost of my house, which, by the way, the bank owns, and me a little bit. Not very much. I want to live there 10 years. And you don't get much in the first 10 years. You got to make that last 25 or 30 or whatever it is towards the end. So yeah, it's all relative, okay? And I don't think they define it that way on purpose. You always can ask, who? Your bishop.
In other words, it wouldn't look good, you go on up to a communion call on a Corvette.
I can't get out of them.
That Escalade might be okay. The Rolls Royce may be a little bit, the chauffeur Rolls Royce with a butler serving you drinks in the back, maybe a little over the top, even in the United States. England is probably okay. I can't afford to pay the taxes on it, so I 283 says you can't absent yourself from the diocese for more than 1 month of vacation normally. Can you leave longer? Yes. You got to talk to who? The bishop. It says in 288, permanent deacons are not obligated to 284, 285, 3 and 4, 286, and 287. A lot of those have to do with making a living. Okay? You know, you can't, it says something about not getting involved with the financial affairs. Well, if your job is a stockbroker, I think you'd have to be involved. So they exempt those for permanent deacons. And 289 says no military service without permission of the ordinary. Your 5-minute clock, it's fast, says it's 25 till. My watch says it's 7:30. I think that's official break time, isn't it? I'm on time this week. I want that to be noted on my class evaluation. The 1 week he was on time. Yes, sir. All right.
Deacon, you want us to be like ordained pretty soon, so a good grade in this class will go a long way?
I don't think it has any bearing.
Ordained priest. You said ordained. I said deacon.
I want to ordain deacon.
Wow, scratch that.
In case.
Up to tape.
Just in case.
Wait a minute, I'm in the wrong class.
You said priest. Yeah, that's my name, David Crass.
No, I'm trying to figure out. So Alan is on the TV,
Yep.
Alan
on the
is
Skype. Alan, you Skyping? Break time, buddy. The pizza looks really good. You want me to get you a piece?
He's the pickle guy though, man. He's got.
I know, we get no pickles tonight.
I know.
Dang. Bronson's a long trip, buddy. I don't think you're getting that pizza.
Only if we get a jar of pickles.
You did ship the pickles up, right? No, he didn't.
I'm good.
Dang.
I'm gonna run there too.
But I can't complain. He sent me the recipe.
Ooh.
That helps me out. But I saw that and I said, stuff.
I think I got our artist from here.
Yay.
Generally, that's not one. School board, county, board, those kind of things are generally accepted. What you gotta do is if you're in doubt, you gotta ask the chancellor and say, can I maintain?
Now I know how to go back.
Yeah, usually you go through the chancellor or through the chair, he can,
You're going to see 4 or 5 options.
say, I need to answer this.
I had a new laptop, and I didn't realize, it was not.
Dude, that might be a little tough.
I got here, so I'll start sending.
Right, and usually those things on the lower levels are not.
Love it.
I'd say probably.
Did you put your back?
You'd be on school board.
Yes, I did.
I couldn't get much of, I don't
If I was drinking,
even think you could be on like the city council. But that's,
Check with her today to make sure.
because the government didn't want to see.
Him actually, Sterling actually
Well, in this
got
case, it was federal.
crazy about it, he
Local.
called her.
Okay, they didn't
I
want
think
to.
on Sunday night.
The church and state is also.
Like,
But,
yeah, what is that?
usually local government bodies. I don't know the rules on that one. I've never had to do it. I always use that as an excuse for doing nothing but voting once or twice every term for somebody. I gotta get some more, Rick.